if you would please take a seat for this special keynote address session. We're appreciative of Kaplan and Drysdale as the sponsor of this session, and we couldn't think of a better keynote speaker than Mr. Charles P. Rettig. Chuck Rettig has a long history with the section of taxation. He came up through the Committee on Civil and Criminal Tax Penalties, which he chaired. He was a member of the council of the section. He was a vice chair of administration and led his resourcefulness and commitment and passion led us through an era where we needed to cut back on our budget because of budgetary issues that we were dealing with, and he did a great job. Chuck was nominated as Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service in 2018 and was confirmed and began his term in October. The section of taxation was delighted to see him. We knew the type of leadership that he would provide, and he has lived up to our expectations. Chuck has been, again, resourceful, passionate, committed to his job. He is, in my view, from dealing with revenue agents, and many of you, improved the morale of the Internal Revenue Service dramatically. As he completes his term, we know that we'll see him back at tax section meetings, but having him to present this keynote address has meant a lot to me as section chair, and Chuck, we look forward to your remarks. We hope to hear your comments on how the service is going to deal with increased funding and the opportunities that are going to be presented for the service. Already, what you've done in leading them through the challenging times that you've faced, the pandemic, the government shutdowns, they put you behind, but you're building it back, and I know the service is going to get its arms around the scheduling and the timing and the promptness of handling filings and getting us back to where we need to be. The Honorable Charles P. Rettig, the podium is yours, and we look forward to your remarks.
So I go by Chuck. I'm Charlie's dad. I'm Tam's husband, Christina's dad. I'm the same guy that I was, before I took this position. I'm the same guy, born and raised in Los Angeles, public school kid. As commissioner, I'll quickly tell you one of my most proud moments. About October, November last year, I was invited to do a town hall for Los Angeles Unified Public School District. The superintendent of the school district introduced me. It was about 11 o'clock at night, DC time. I rushed home. I set up my laptop on my kitchen table, which is also my desk at home. Tam and I have a 2-bedroom apartment in DC. She works out of the 2nd bedroom. I work out of the desk in the kitchen. And I want to visualize this. Many of you know Tam. Tam would like you to think that she's 5'4". She was born and raised in Vietnam, as you know. I'm 6'6", and so I rush home and I, with my suit on and everything, and couldn't be more proud than to give back to LA Unified School District. I'm a public school district kid. During grade school, I knew a lot of principals, but I was never on student body council. I have a habit of talking in class, and whatnot. So the superintendent at LA Unified Public School District introduces me as one of their most important alumni. I got emotional. I'm no different than anybody else I went to school with at any level, or anybody I've worked with or anything else. And then I have to tell you, because I want you to visualize this, those of you who know Tam, and Tam is a critical part of my life, and in some sense, some of you might not realize this, but also in yours. And this journey not only included Tam, it included our children, it includes each of you, and it certainly includes everybody at the IRS, without question. One of the most important alumni, LA Unified School District, Mr. Rettig. And she then says, and Mrs. Rettig is a graduate of Los Angeles High School having immigrated from Vietnam and having to repeat 12th grade before she could enter college in California. So I'm trying to be commissioner-like, which, I read the book, I studied other commissioners, this is what you do. And I'm looking at the screen and I'm doing that high school photo smile. And just beyond the screen is 5'4" Tam going, "Yes! Yes!" And I go, "Honey, I don't have it on mute." LA Unified Public School District can do a Zoom call to 10,000 different families in 4 languages. IRS can do Zoom to 1,000 in essentially 1 language. I brought that back the next day and I said to Deputy Commissioner Ops Support, I said, "Hey, LA Unified Public School District," which is nobody moves into LA Unified School District so their kids, go to this certain college or this or that. And I go, "They can do 10,000 in 4 languages." My Deputy Commissioner Ops Support says, "Well, that's Chinese Zoom. We're not allowed to use it." I'm a proud military family parent. My son is a major medical officer, United States Army, 194th Armored Brigade, Fort Benning, Georgia. The person who said that to me is a Commodore, Naval Reserve. And I said, "Jeff, the Chinese have something better than we do?" And he says, "I'll get back to you." I don't accept second place. I don't accept it for our country. I don't accept it for the employees of the IRS. I don't accept it for the tax professional community that we're privileged to work with. And I certainly don't accept it for taxpayers in this country. I just left IRS here, Farmers Branch. Couldn't be more proud to spend quite a few hours with employees of the Internal Revenue Service who have given. When you hear and see somebody say, IRS got $79.6 billion because of, let me answer that. IRS got $79.6 billion because it is, barring the military, other than the military, the most important group of individuals who serve you in this country. We interact with more Americans than any other organization on earth. We do our best for every person. It doesn't matter where they come from, the color of their skin, whether they do or don't speak English, whether they have an accent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're proud. And I couldn't be more proud than to say, I work with others at the IRS. I have yet to say to IRS employees, by the way, I got a list. I've done 407 presentations as commissioner. The figure given by events that I've spoken at on the outside is 400,000 people. On the inside, I've spoken in 23 states and 2 territories, and to 48,000 IRS employees. Obviously, some of them more than once, same with practitioners and whatnot. It quickly dawned on me that a message that we could get out, we collectively, we could get out. And that message is that everybody is important. It happens that people think of the IRS as tax administration, tax collection, tax something, tax something. COVID gave us the opportunity for people to look at us as what I came on board with, and many of you knew what I came on board with. We're people, and we care about people. And many of you have served with the Internal Revenue Service or another federal agency or the military. You have served the people of this country. The IRS employees, in our way, serve the people of this country. Over 10% of our employees are veterans. A much higher percentage of our employees are military families like myself. And that's important because we have the opportunity to talk to people as people. So during COVID, well, let me move forward because I don't want to miss one point. ABA Tax Section and ACTC were the first to step up for us on the false rhetoric of 87,000 armed agents. I wrote an op-ed. There have been 2 op-eds written by me while I've been commissioner. I will not accept somebody taking a position to say that the people of the IRS who live and work in the communities that we proudly serve, who come from the communities that we proudly serve, would disrespect people of this country. If you think that, I'm inviting you to any IRS office that you choose to meet the people of the IRS. We greatly support the people in this country. in more ways than you could imagine. I am the guy who shut down the Internal Revenue Service in March of 2020. We did not know the nature, extent, et cetera, what COVID was, the impacts of COVID. I'm also the guy, and I've been on the tour, if you will, meeting with the employees, that told our employees in June of 2020, you need to come back in the office. We didn't have masks, we didn't have sanitizers, we didn't have, and there certainly was no vaccination. And I put our people back in harm's way. You should know that in July of 2020, we had 23 million pieces of unopened mail. You should know that in 2021, we were current with our mail. We receive and process 1 to 1.5 million pieces of mail a week. How did you get through a backlog of 23 million pieces of mail? It's called mandatory overtime and authorized overtime. 6,000 employees, mandatory overtime, get in there and process that mail. 10,000 employees had authorized overtime. We see the pressure, we understand the pressure. I don't know who the next commissioner is going to be. My hope is with you, the next commissioner stands up to pressure on the employees of the Internal Revenue Service. They didn't sign up to have people say that they're going to do something untoward in their communities to taxpayers or tax professionals. It's important. When the ABA tax section stood up, when Wells and when ACTC stood up and said this is just not true, my request would be that you stand up sooner and be more vocal. Your voice matters. Any tax professional organization, the voice matters. Say what you want, say what you believe in, say what your members support. I'm not asking and telling you what to say. But I will tell you that in the last 4 years, there were times I felt like I was in this fight by myself. If Tam was here, Tam's not here in in Dallas. Many people have asked, and I appreciate that, and you all know, many of you have been out with us. It's not Chuck, it's Chuck and Tam and Charlie and Christina and Dayton and Trenton and Wells and every one of you. That's how I look at it. And that's how I look at, we're in this together. I came on board, tax administration is important, the IRS is important. My goal was for when I leave the IRS, and I knew I'm leaving, yeah, I'm on a term, statutory term. Every commissioner leaves November 12th every 5th year. My November 12th is this year. My goal, which I probably stated to most of you, would be that the IRS be on rails, headed in a good direction. That was before a 35-day lapse in appropriations in January 2019. That was before COVID, and obviously that was before the agency got $79.6 billion. I'm going to touch a little bit about why, if you left the agency 2 or 3 years ago, don't talk as though you know the agency. You don't. We are different. We're different because of COVID. We're different because we had to have certain workarounds. We had to do certain things. I had to tell people to do certain things that I never would have asked for on the private side, and I had to ask them to do certain things. And then they, in many cases, went well beyond your wildest imagination of how we can actually serve you and serve taxpayers better. The employees of the Internal Revenue Service earned $79.6 billion. I firmly believe that. I will say that forever. I have their back 1,000% while I'm on board. I will have their back 1,000% when I'm out. I've told every employee of the Internal Revenue Service. A lot of people say, well, what's it going to be like when you leave? Well, I don't know who the next commissioner is going to be. None of us know yet. Until you read a name, with an official nomination, don't listen to rumors. Until you read a name with an official nomination, I wouldn't speculate. I know enough to know not to speculate. Let's put it that way. What I would ask is that you support the next commissioner 1,000%, as I know you have supported me, and I know you've supported my family. Like in the military context, my son deployed twice, and he's a medical officer. So he's not a behind-the-scenes necessarily person, but if you have a child in the military who deploys, you wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning. You have those nights. You have those thoughts. You're doing something important. You're in court. Maybe you're in the appeals court and you're arguing, and somebody says something, right? To me, usually, somebody says something about the flag or our country, I flip to my son, right? And now he's inside the U.S., but he's with the tank division. Somebody from the tax section, when Russia invaded Ukraine, said, hey, is Charlie going to deploy? I hadn't thought of it. And my hope and thought would be, well, we wouldn't go tank on tank with the Russians, right? I think, Air Force or whatever. Not like I know anything about it. But I would tell you that when he has deployed, I've been the most proud American on the planet to have a child. When I say, do you need to go? Because his deployments he volunteers for. Do you need to go? And he says, Dad, I'm the best trained for this. I'm not going to tell you I was the best trained to come in as IRS commissioner. I read everything that people wrote me coming on board. New York Times, I think it was, he doesn't even have an Ivy League education. I went to the statute and I said, I didn't see that. I will tell you that this public school kid, who's very proud to be a public school kid, LA Unified School District, doesn't have an Ivy League education, but my daughter, the veterinarian, does, and this public school kid paid for that education. My grandparents and my dad immigrated from Germany, and my German grandparents taught us the one thing you can give your children, nobody can ever take away, is education. Make sure you educate your children. And I did so. I'm proud of everybody I've had the opportunity to interact with. In terms of why and where are we today and where are we headed? And all of this, well, how's the IRS going to spend $79.6 billion? Did the IRS really need this money? Let me give you one example. So you're aware Treasury issued sanctions Russian oligarchs. Do you know who follows through on that? IRS, criminal investigation. Go find assets, in the case that most of you are probably familiar with, yachts. Where are the yachts held? We'll go down to some island and you got 10 layers of beneficial ownership. We were asked, how much money do you need to go chase these, for CI to go chase these? Within a day, we gave a number. How much money did we get? You got it right. Nothing. Did we slow up for that? No. We did what every commissioner's ever done, which is you have your priorities set over a period of 5, 6, or 7 years. You move some from this year and you free up money and you go do what you do. When you read that a yacht was seized in Fiji or a yacht was seized in Germany, thank an IRS employee. I hope you're aware of the importance. This is let you know the importance of the IRS, why you want the IRS to be funded. If you're a proud American, you want the IRS to be funded. This is not a question. This is a fact. I was in a Senate finance hearing. A senator said to me, Commissioner, I want you to know I support funding technology of the IRS. And then he said, and I'm a Republican. Tam has spent 4 years telling me if there's not a question, don't lean into it. My former law partner spent 36 years. If there's not a question, why do you lean in? Steve Toscher, when I came on board, said, one thing about Chuck, he likes to throw that hand grenade and see how people react. Senator says in a hearing, and all of this is on C-SPAN, which Tam keeps reminding me of, I support funding IRS technology, and I'm a Republican. You know what I said is what you would say. I leaned in and I said, well, I'm from California. I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. California has an undeclared status. But I am a proud American. You're all proud Americans. You should all be telling me you support funding the IRS appropriately. Bring on whatever oversight you want to bring on. We've got it. We're good. We have oversight anyway. But go ahead. You want some special oversight to be able to say it's worthy for the IRS to be funded. Bring whatever oversight you want. I asked for oversight in my confirmation hearing in 2018. By the way, if you've watched any of these hearings, you've seen me, I don't want to say challenge, but interact with senators and congressmen. You've seen me routinely say, can I come to your office after this hearing and explain why what you're saying is not accurate? I'm guessing 100 times. I testify 5, 6, 7, 8 times a year up on the Hill. Whenever they ask is when I testify. In 4 years, not a single member of Congress has invited me back to their office to explain why what they thought and were saying was inaccurate. Why would that be? If they're proud Americans, I'm calling them on it. When I don't have the caller, 1 month from yesterday, I'm no longer commissioner. When I don't have the caller, expect my voice to get a little louder, a little more direct. If you're representing the people of this country, represent the people of this country. COVID, I shut down the IRS. CARES Act comes out March 27, 2020. April 10, we launched hundreds of millions of payments to people who, for the first time in their life, lost their job, maybe lost a family member, maybe were worried about a car payment, an apartment payment, et cetera, et cetera. We did that. I shut down the IRS when I know that between February 15 and April 15 of every year, we issue about 95% of the refundable credits that take more people out of poverty than anything else that we do. Do you know that during COVID, IRS employees issued 3 rounds of economic impact payments, 2 rounds of 1040 refunds, totaling about $1.5 trillion, more than 500 million payments. These are people that others are saying are going to be, inappropriately interacting with tax professionals or tax accountants. I can tell you that in 36 years on the outside, I can't recall, I will say rarely, but I cannot recall a single situation where I thought any IRS employee was acting with a personal agenda. They're acting based on their knowledge, their experience, their training, and what they see in cases, as I was doing on the private side. But I never saw a personal agenda. So the rhetoric that comes out, that gets wrapped, and the employees see this. The employees feel this, and they come back to work the next day. So my ask for tax section and ACTC is to try to operate a little bit through the eyes of the employees. Our gross revenue last year was $4.2 trillion. It's a lot of zeros. How does that relate? That's 96% of the gross revenue of the United States of America. You want a bridge? The government doesn't build bridges. Government doesn't build aircraft carriers. Government doesn't build airplanes. It contracts it. So every time you go over a bridge, thank an IRS employee. 96% of that has our fingerprint on it. You want us to be successful. You want us to answer phones timely. You want us to be in communities, in the language of the people in their communities, serving the people of their communities. We have 360 taxpayer assistance centers. We had 358. We have 360. We just opened 2 in Puerto Rico. 38 of them were not fully staffed. One of our first acts is to fully staff every taxpayer assistance center in the country with at least 3 people. I think as tax professionals, you know that you can actually make an appointment and go into a TAC and meet with somebody who has access to the taxpayer's account and can make the adjustment. You should also know that over half the people who call for that appointment get their matter resolved on the phone. I think that's spectacular. I've yet to read an article about it, whether it's by one of you or by somebody else. I see a lot of articles. Level of service. Level of service. IRS can only answer 1 out of 10 calls. Talk to me November 13th. The people who have said that, I have a stack of articles, by the way. Some of you have heard, and I'm not talking to any person. I've made this kind of comments in some presentations, and people come up, God, I hope you're not talking about my article. No, I'm not. Level of service. IRS only answers 10% of the calls. Our targeted level of service for fiscal year 23 is 85%. But no, to do that, we need to do a lot of movement behind the scenes. We need to bring on, we have to get to 21,000 customer service representatives. You should know that we get X dollars to hire a wide number of people to answer phone calls. I can't take money out of this lane and bring people on. In COVID, we got specific funding to bring another 1,000 people into our phone lanes. We received 221 million phone calls. Our normal is 42 to 44 million, somewhere in that range. We had 13,777 people to answer those calls, and we got to add 1,000, so we were just under 15,000. In 2020, we were receiving calls at the rate of 1,500 per second. I could take Amazon, Walmart, Target, and everybody else's call centers and not handle 1,500 per second. Every time I read an article about the level of service, and it trashes us, let me tell you, during COVID, we flipped to something called Talk Story with Chuck. Talk Story is a Hawaiian term which basically means let's grab a cup of coffee, have a chat. No agenda. Over 1,000 employees participated in Zoom Talk Stories with me. There's no agenda. They were all scheduled for an hour. The shortest one we had, I think, was 2.5 hours. But I talked to the people handling the phone calls, and they were in tears. We did not prepare our people for the phone call that might have come in because somebody didn't get a refund or didn't get their economic impact payment. A tremendous amount of people when they were told they were going to get 1,200, didn't realize it phased out based on income, so they called. They got a lower number. That was a lot of the calls. But we didn't adequately prepare our people for the other part of this. The people called in for a reason, and then they said, and I lost my husband. Commissioner business decision, stay on the call. We can't handle 200 million calls anyway. But the calls we can handle, we're going to show people that we care about them. And every time somebody writes an article about level of service, take a look in our data book at our statistics. Our call time is up 4 to 6 minutes per call. Our system is you go through an automated system where there's a tape that basically tells you certain information. When we're getting high volume, we put it on there. Then you go to a contractor who does not have access to the system, right? But they could say if your adjusted gross income was over X, you would get less than $1,200. Contractors received 27 million phone calls and successfully handled 16 million phone calls. The others was because they didn't have access to the system, because we don't just hand that out because it's Thursday. But we were able to push 16 million calls there. But the ones we handled were up 4 to 6 minutes, times tens of millions of phone calls, because we're people who care about people. And those calls were gut-wrenching. They were real people. You know, I kind of half facetiously say, people back in the day didn't want to come out of their bedroom, even if they lived alone, to go into the kitchen because they might catch COVID. And I had our people in the office. COVID allowed us to become a virtual operation. That is huge for the IRS going forward, because if we have snowstorms, we have hurricanes, we have wildfires, our people can actually stay at home. If we close a facility, our people can stay at home and answer those calls as people. So I'm not somebody who's going to be, how many cars can we push out the door and claim credit for every car we pushed out the door. I'm somebody who's going to say to the employees, I'm proud of you for handling those calls like I would hope every human being would handle a call when they talk to another human being who's suffering. The vast majority of those calls were people who were suffering. And as much and important as the economics was, $1,200 or $600 or $1,400, the fact that they had somebody to talk to was important. The vast majority of that $1.5 trillion was direct deposited into people's accounts, and they did not have to do a thing. TIGTA did a report on EIP1. We were 98% accurate. That's an agency that was not as electronic as it should be, was not able to operate in a virtual environment, an agency that our own people were suffering from the same concerns, health and safety. We lost employees, we had employees test positive, et cetera, et cetera. 98% accurate, EIP1. They did not do a report on EIP2, which was December 2020, but EIP3 was March 2021, 99% accurate. Only because of the IRS employees. So when you talk about IRS, it's not IRS. I told Congress, when you talk about IRS, you talk about it as it's something that doesn't have feelings and people who aren't trying. It's people who are trying. Watch Congress. Watch Congress with the next commissioner, and go back and watch any of mine. You'll see a transgression from day one to now. I respect the members of Congress, and I believe I'm safe in saying they respect me, both sides, a lot. We fight the good fight. They know where I'm coming from. I'm very transparent. The only person who could fire me is the President of the United States. My gosh, what would happen then? I'd have to go back to Los Angeles, to my home, to my cars. I'm a car guy. I do not have a car in Washington, D.C. You starting to see it? I got counseled about a year and a half in saying, you need to stop saying that. People think you're trolling to get fired. I go, well, it's a privilege. You will never, the rest of my life, hear me say, hey, I was Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. I'm no different than any employee of the Internal Revenue Service. No employee of the Internal Revenue Service is more or less important than any other employee. No employee of the Internal Revenue Service is more or less important than you or any person on the planet. Why am I hugely proud? Because during the pandemic, the employees of the Internal Revenue Service performed flawlessly. I know you're not all huggers, but when you meet an IRS employee, go ahead and give them a hug. I push them. I push people sometimes to tears, not directly, but they had to take calls where they had tears. And then I had to basically, in these Zoom calls, sit with them and think, what have we done? But proud, because every one of those tears was also our people knew they made a difference. I'm the 49th Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Include yourself in that. I'm a public school kid from LA. I'm the father of a very proud father, I have to say, of a daughter who's a veterinarian. Because my daughter says, Dad, do you ever tell people you have a daughter? I said, well, when I say my son's in the Army, that means I have another child. It must be a daughter, right? I didn't say one of my sons. When I testified one time and I made a comment about, having a son in the military, that night, my daughter called and she said, Dad, when Charlie retires from the military, you'll be able to testify and say both your children are vets. You should understand I'm surrounded by strong people, right? I'm the slow one in my sort of extended family. Look at our progress report, which is basically, we issue it in like May of the year after our fiscal year, and it's basically what we did during the year. Look at it for why we've been on board, and then look at it for any year before we came on board. The front page of the progress report used to be the front page, the front of 1111 Constitution, these big stones or the pillars. Purposefully, our 2019, 20, 21, and 22 progress reports are red, white, and blue, stars and stripes, because we didn't tell our story well. I'm building you into $79.6 billion. If one organization for the country brings in 96% of the revenue of the country, the people in that organization are important. I shouldn't have to tell a member of Congress the importance of every person at the IRS to the success of this country. We are soon going to release the email that was released at almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I got sworn in at 2 o'clock on October 1, 2018. Before 3 o'clock, we sent out an email that I wrote, my first email. The vast majority of the emails from the commissioner are written by me to the employees, to the frontline employees. I'm less concerned about our executives, managers, and whatnot. And I came on board knowing tons of frontline employees. They're the ones that we push, and they're the ones that, to me, are the most important. The email says, the success of this country depends upon the success of us, and we will be successful. That was October 1, 2018. I didn't know COVID was coming. So let's start with the flag. It's on everything we do. If you get materials from an IRS employee, it should have some semblance of the flag waving red, white, and blue on it. That's our slide deck. Has been since 2019. Shift gears. COVID. Horrific on all of us. It also provided a unique opportunity for the world to see the IRS as something other than tax administration, tax collection, tax examination, tax. Congress called upon the Internal Revenue Service to issue first-round EIPs as rapidly as possible. Congress could have called upon Social Security Administration or the VA to do that. They have an infrastructure, they're a benefits distribution organization. They distribute benefits to SSA and VA members, beneficiaries on a monthly basis. We issue refunds annually, and the refund calculation and infrastructure is radically different than a benefits calculation structure. Refunds are based on numbers that are on returns. Benefits are based on, a calculus of basically an income number associated with, dependents, associated with, are you in the military, not in the military, and that has to do with whether or not, both spouses have to be, have Social Security numbers. We had to know all that. We also had to process tens of millions of payments for people who do not have a filing requirement, Social Security, VA, and we had to get it right, and we had to get it as accurate as possible. We also had to use that, we knew, to help adjust the emotions of people in this country. We were going to be their first interaction, and we did the first round within 10 days. CARES Act, March 27, 2020, we launched, that was on a Friday when it got signed, we launched exactly 2 Fridays later, over 100 million payments. We did the second round of EIPs in December of 2020. We did 147 million payments, $142 billion in 48 hours. We did the third round within 24 hours in March of 2021. And by the way, it wasn't the same system because the requirements were different. The people who were entitled were different. We had to keep shifting that, and I had to keep putting people back in the trenches to do that. And that's not our day job. A lot of people think of our day job as processing returns, filing season, et cetera, et cetera. So when you get up and you might want to complain about the IRS, pause. You know, think about the half full part of that glass, but I'll tell you it's about 97% full, not half full, about what people in this country received. And do they deserve better? Of course they do. I'm with you on that. Number two, you know, I'm the first commissioner. By the way, I've been to the Pentagon twice. Why did I go to the Pentagon? Wells Hall. I have the utmost respect for Wells Hall, military vita. I went in 2019 and I went about 2 weeks ago. The military needs to support military vita. The tax section supports the Adopt-A-Base programs. The Dobbins Air Force Base program down in Georgia is a role model for all of us. When you wake up and think, what should it look like? It should look like the Dobbins thing. I've met with 2 different 3-star generals, and I'll just tell you, I'll kind of paraphrase a little bit. The first one, they used to put more than 7 figures into military vita, and they saw military vita as free tax returns for military members. And they didn't see that as a big issue. I presented it differently. I presented it as military members, like members of different ethnic communities in this country, get preyed upon. I can go in around any base and say, I can get every one of you a $500 refund. It's going to cost you $200. But 2 years later, IRS is going to come and claim that $500 because you're not entitled to it. And then I said, and I know a little bit about how this works because I have a son in the military, and I made a comment, and I said, you know, I don't have to tell you guys, I shouldn't have to tell you guys what it means to the future career of a person in the military if IRS issues a wage levy to Department of Defense to get that $500 back. They're not going to be offered the ability to re-enlist or to add another contract for officers. And with that, they all went, we can't have that. First meeting, a 3-star general says, I could easily see now, you're coming at it different. I could see how this could be, you know, $1 million resource allocation. But I'm comfortable in my personal life and my professional life, and my worst case scenario is I get fired and sent back to Los Angeles. And there's a little bit of dialogue, and then I made a comment, and I said, I'll use Wells. Well, General Hall just said he saw this as a $2 or $3 million annual allocation for the military. I don't think anybody ever recharacterized the general's words so quickly. And he says, is that what I said? And there was like this chorus that the lowest was a major, and they said, no, sir, you said $1 million. I already had the million. I was going for the 2 or 3 million. And I followed that up with, why would I care more about your young military service members than you all do? Y'all ought to think of that. The second meeting I had, and this is leading to my second topic, was just a couple of weeks ago. And that meeting was a lot of different things, but in part, it's a different 3-star general, and I'm very respectful of rank. And I said, I gave him the background of my wife. As many of you know, she's a refugee, so I'm the first commissioner whose spouse came into this country as a refugee. Tam will not tell you directly, but she was a boat person. June 1981, age 17, 101 people, 27-foot boat. It was her 9th time trying to escape from Vietnam. They got rescued at sea. They got picked up by a freighter, taken to a refugee camp in Singapore. If you were to come into my office at the Internal Revenue Service and you enter through this door, you see a bookcase over here, you'll see a picture of a freighter. If you were to sit where I sit at the conference table in my room and you look over that way, you'll see a picture of that same freighter. That freighter is the Keynote. It's a Greek freighter that in June 1981 went 3 days out of its way to come up on this 27-foot boat with 101 Vietnamese refugees who went 7 days with no food and rescued them. My wife would not be alive today had the captain of the Keynote not come in. Why do I keep the pictures of the freighter around? There's still people out there, whether they're living in a community inside the United States, outside the United States, or they're at sea. Life is about protecting the people who do not have the ability to protect themselves, helping people who do not know that we exist, making a difference. That's my number 2. During the pandemic, we issued, for the first time in the history of the United States of America, a Form 1040 tax return in a language other than English. The 2020 and 2021 1040s are available in Spanish. We had more than 90 million visits on irs.gov non-English speaking pages last year. Most of those pages didn't exist a handful of years ago. There's 170 languages fluently spoken in the United States of America. And we have translation interpretive services available for every one of those. Tam got called in, and I apologize, some of you know this story, but those of you who don't and who know Tam, you'll appreciate it. Taxpayer First Act. Think of taxpayers first, operate through the eyes of the taxpayers. Service to taxpayers is important. Taxpayer First Act office reached out and said, can Tam come in and talk to us? We want to talk about and find out how we can be more impactful in the different communities, ethnic communities. In her case, start with Vietnamese. Tam's parents live in Little Saigon, Southern California. I'm going to come back to Taxpayer First Act, but I'm also going to tell you, I was raised in a family. My German grandparents, when we were kids and we went over there, and there was a privilege to answer the phone, and it was always in German. Grandma, it's for you. My German grandmother, this is generational, said, speak English. Speak English. I'm not going to talk to you if you don't speak English. My German grandparents got their blue passport as quickly as they could. They tried to lose their accents as quickly as they could. They tried to assimilate into the community, to be part of the community, thinking I had to be like everybody else in the community. I have told every employee at the IRS, and I'm telling all of you, I'm proud to stand here today in front of you and say that my in-laws have been here for almost 40 years. They live in Little Saigon. They've lived in Saigon, Vietnam, and Little Saigon, California, and they do not speak English, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be in a country where you don't have to assimilate. I'm proud to be in a country where we respect people for the people that they are, and we give them the opportunities. My in-laws are as important as any of us are to the success of this country. And to have people who can be themselves, who can be unique, to value that and to respect that, as I say that, to me, that's IRS employees, because we are a reflection of that. The number of times I've gone out today, at least 6 people came up to me at the IRS office and said, and when I go through stories like this, I'm an immigrant, or my parents don't speak English, right? Or, I was in Korea. I mean, we get all of that. We live in the communities. We're the same people. But Tam's parents don't speak English. Doesn't make them less than. We shifted into languages during the pandemic. Tam got called in. How can we get more engaged with different ethnic communities? Taxpayer First Act, get more engaged with different ethnic communities. This part's not going to surprise many of you who know Tam. She talked to her dad. She wrote out 20, 25 pages, single space, and she, the night before, wanted to tell me the 20, 25 pages. Honey, you want me to tell you what I'm going and talk to IRS people tomorrow about? No, I'm okay. I wasn't invited to the meeting. When I heard what she was going to say, I decided I'm going to the meeting to protect the IRS employees from my wife. She's at a conference table. She is the only person Asian cultural heritage in the room. And these are people who really want to do good. They want to serve different ethnic communities. We all do. We all want to support and respect them. I already told you Tam's a boat person. That's critical here. 15 minutes in, the hand goes up. I have seen the hand. My children have seen the hand. And it's not a pretty thing. The hand goes up, and she says, and by the way, she'd give 1,000% for every person at the IRS as well. She says, we need to pause. You all understand you can't go into the Vietnamese community and be accepted, right? You're not from there, and you'll never be from there. So me hearing that was like, the difference between being US-centric, operating out of the eyes of US-centric, to really operating out of the eyes of people. What she was saying in saying that is, you don't have a family member who was raped in a refugee camp. You don't have a family member who died at sea. You don't have a family member who died in one of the villages during the war. You don't have, you didn't come to this country not speaking English, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Vietnamese to Vietnamese, they don't have to tell each other that. They all know. They know. That's how they got out of the country. That's how they escaped. And many of them are still there. So they won't say it. And so what she's saying is, you need to be from the community, come to the IRS, and go back to the community with your message. Frank Augustino, round 1 EIPs, reached in and said, your friends want to help. What can we do to help? And we were IRS was operating 24/7 to figure out how to get these payments out, how to get outreach materials out. And the discussion with Frank was, we need things in more languages. We're currently operating about 4 languages. We need things in more languages. Within about 10 days, We had our outreach materials that we drafted in English came back to me in 35 different languages. We were able to take those onto the streets of this country and make a difference, tell people they're eligible, particularly people who didn't have a filing requirement. Do you know today we have relationships with 18,000 different community organizations, 13,000 public school organizations? We have relationships with a media outlet that's 135 different ethnic media outlets that when we want to issue something, we can go to them. We can go to the public school districts for awareness on things like EITC. In January every year, we have our EITC Awareness Day. We can push something out and we can get it to the frontline people, real people. We can make a real difference. That's when I say this is not the IRS that you might have been at 8, 10, 12 years ago. This IRS is really an of the people, for the people, by the people, and will forever be that. Me leaving the IRS people will not change. Puerto Rico and Mississippi Delta. I recently had a congressman come to the office and say, what certainties do you have that this will carry on after you're gone? By the way, when people say, what's your legacy? Don't ask me that. You know that answer. I have a wife and 4 children. That's my legacy. Same one I started with, the same one I'm ending with. And you all know, you've met her. My wife loves me to death, you know? It's amazing that one person can love another person that much. It brings a tear to my eye standing here, you know? And how can I be so sure? Because at 10 after 7 every morning when I leave the house, I remind her how in love she is, you know? She would stand up and go, it's brainwashing, it's brainwashing. Well, brainwashing works, you know? 26 years later, that lady is madly in love with me. But I'm comfortable in my personal life, so I'm willing to take risks. I took the IRS into a very risk world. We did our homework well in advance of the legislation for EIP 1, 2, and 3. You may have seen a pretty hot letter came off the Hill when Social Security beneficiaries did not get any EIP payments 3 weeks after legislation. There was a letter to me and to the administrator for Social Security Administration. How can this be? How can Social Security beneficiaries not have received any payments? So I could have written a letter back, and instead we had somebody communicate, not officially, we don't have their information. They need to get us their information for us to do something. The head of Social Security wrote like a 5-page letter that said essentially they're not authorized to do the homework until there's legislation and there's funds. We went at risk. We did our homework. You know, otherwise today we'd be doing EIP 3. The employees took that risk. By the way, when you take that risk, you might wonder what's the consequence if you do that? Because I asked that question, and the consequence is Deputy Commissioner Ops Support goes to jail, and I said, well, I visited clients in jail. I can come find you. It's okay. But for the good of the country, we're going to go ahead and launch. Languages, and Puerto Rico and Mississippi Delta. So I told you, 1040s, language, it's in Spanish. You need to hold the agency accountable. Why only Spanish, right? It should be in 30 languages. We live in the most technologically advanced country in the world with the most significant tech companies on the planet, and now we have funding. So let's see where else we're going to go, and we should all intend to hold the agency accountable, and they're for it. They're all for it. Puerto Rico, we're going to have 3,277 IRS employees in Puerto Rico during fiscal 23. Why did you go to Puerto Rico? 2 hurricanes and an earthquake, and I'm kind of trying to do this fast for you. 2 hurricanes and an earthquake. The last hurricane was like 700,000 people without power. I went down to Puerto Rico. I met with a woman who's in charge of the university system and some high schools, and they have a 25% drop in enrollment because the people who could left Puerto Rico and came to the States. So we're offering federal jobs in Puerto Rico to bring people back to Puerto Rico to rebuild Puerto Rico from inside Puerto Rico. The first hiring we did, we looked for 500 people. We got 600 qualified applicants, and they're also bilingual. I met with the governor of Puerto Rico in his palace, thanked him for allowing us to be there, and said I want to explain to him why we're in Puerto Rico. He said one word: bilingual. Now, this is, we all have that little angel and the little devil, right? And, you know, I can hear my mom back then saying, be respectful. It's an island, you know, it's a long swim. I actually said, with all due respect, sir, I can get all the bilingual Spanish employees I need out of California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas well before I even get to Florida or New York. We're in Puerto Rico to rebuild Puerto Rico with federal jobs. 3,277 jobs is $205 million into the Puerto Rican economy every year. So I was down there with the person for GSA, who was our landlord. So they just had another hurricane. Do you reflect and think maybe we shouldn't be in Puerto Rico? Our facilities, 1.5 million people without power this time, our facilities did not lose power. Lights were on. Our facilities have showers, our facilities have cots, our facilities have food supplies. We provide showers for first responders in our facilities. The landlord of our facilities, if the generator needed to be this big, he went there. They are thrilled to have us in Puerto Rico. But I took a US-centric view on something. I've made a lot of mistakes. Took a US-centric view on something, and when I was meeting with the university, it was, I think we need like an immersion course, because the people who know English, but they're not comfortable in English, comfortable enough to answer our phones, I want them to be comfortable enough. When I met with the governor, I said, by the way, your question to me should be, why 3,277? Why not 7,000 federal jobs in Puerto Rico? We went to Puerto Rico because our hiring, actually in Austin, Texas, we had looked for 2,000 jobs. We had 600 applicants and only 100 were qualified. We need to do different things. We need to approach tax administration and our world differently. It's very important now as we're into a massive hiring, right? So I thought we'll train people who are less comfortable in English to be more comfortable in English. And then Tom Cullinan and I were in a car together, and Tom says, so why do they need to speak English? Why don't we have a Spanish-only line? You know, for Spanish call. And we can hire them all tomorrow in the outlying areas. We can rebuild the rest of Puerto Rico with jobs. What's the difference we see in hiring people in Puerto Rico and maybe some other locations? Same people handle our job fairs. The people that handle job fairs were with me down in Puerto Rico, and they said, well, you know, when we go to whatever, pick a city, the person's like, well, so what are the benefits? And they go, sir, I got to tell you, when we come to Puerto Rico, it's like, is this where I sign? Like, and bilingual and respectful, and they are thrilled that we're there. Mississippi Delta is a reflection of Puerto Rico. We are rapidly expanding operations in Clarksdale and Greenville, Mississippi, because I looked at the EITC heat map. Where do we get more claims for EITC than anywhere else in the country? EITC pulls more people out of poverty than anything else that we have. Federal government makes payments. You don't have to have a tax obligation, but you can get over $6,000 back by filing a tax return, which you have to file to get the EITC. So on the heat map, where do we get the most claims? Clarksdale and Greenville, Mississippi. I went down to Clarksdale. We are rapidly and significantly expanding operations down there. I met with, I think it must be every politician and economic development person in like the state of Mississippi. These folks are legit. They want it, they live there, it's their community. And as I explained to them, the story I just told you about Tam, we can't do this without you. We can support you in doing this. We need you in the community doing it, and we'll provide the resources and the jobs, right? It's the same kind of a concept. Somebody said to me, well, why would you be in Clarksdale, Mississippi? There's crime there, which is part why nobody else is going there. My response is, I'm from Los Angeles. Have you ever heard of the Bloods and the Crips? I live in Washington, D.C. There have been murders within walking distance, many within walking distance of my apartment. But we are going and we're bringing protective services and security. Somebody has to start. I'm proud to say that we have an outreach from the USDA. Can they be part of our Mississippi Delta program? That's homegrown program. That's not some other part of the federal government. That's IRS employees care about people in this country who they don't know, right? I've never been to Mississippi before. And a congresswoman from, a senator from Mississippi asked me, sir, how did you, in that tone, find Mississippi Delta, find Clarksdale? And I wanted to say, well, we did some studies, we did a year of surveys, then we did a year of focus groups, then we did this. But I know that every day that people are without jobs down there, they're without jobs. There's 3 and 4 generations without jobs. We needed to move fast. And I said, we just went to the heat map, right? This didn't seem to be too difficult of calculation. How did we launch languages so effectively and huge during the pandemic? The original pitch to me was, we're going to spend a year and look at census data to see what languages we should go into. And then we're going to spend a year and hold some focus groups and see which of our products we should go into those languages. And then in year 3, we're going to launch. And I said, well, number 1, I said, census data is out there. Find the top 50 languages, pick 20. I said, now number 2, go to irs.gov, find the top 50 hits that we get, and see which of those, it's not going to be your first 20 or 30, but which of those could be most impactful to people in need in underserved communities. Now in year 3, I want you to launch. And we launched in 2020. The 2020 tax return was in Spanish. And we launched online, and we're in these communities, and we have our relationships in these communities. So we have the people, to use Tam's words, the people in the community supporting the efforts of the IRS. We have tax practitioners supporting the efforts of the IRS. Let me kind of wrap up on $79.6 billion. My op-ed I thought was clear. We're not going to have 87,000 armed agents. Respect the people at the IRS for who they are. You should know that in the last 4 years, while I've been commissioner, IRS Criminal Investigation Cyber Crimes Unit took down the largest child exploitation site in the history of the world, 338 arrests, 37 countries, rescued 23 actively exploited children, some of whom were located inside the United States. That's us. You should know that while I was commissioner, IRS Cyber Crimes Unit took down terrorism financing sites for Al-Qaeda, Hamas, and ISIS, and then actually, with supervision, ran those sites and collected contributions and then gave the contributions to Terrorism Victims Fund. That's us. You should know that the seizure of the largest virtual currency seizure in the history of the world was us, seizure of a wallet out of a cloud. The reason I bring some of that up is if you run into people, you have somebody who owns a restaurant who thinks they're a little quick and they can operate in a virtual currency, know that all that activity happened in the dark net with the virtual currencies. We own the dark net. We are in the dark net 24/7. If you've seen Game of Thrones, there are 2 things I've wanted as commissioner. 1, I got IRS Criminal Investigation. If you know the night guard, while we're all asleep, there's somebody out there. That's IRS Criminal Investigation. They're the night guard. They're working 24/7. They're taking down child exploitation sites. I sleep better at night because I know what they're doing. I have met with the people in these cyber crimes teams, and I am humbled and in awe to meet with them. You should know that these teams all have young children. Every member of the team has young children. They saw thousands of pictures that no human beings should see. And they moved forward and they took it down. There's a lot of others that aren't nearly as public, but that's why you want to support the IRS. That's why you want the IRS to have $79.6 billion in funding, is that the world needs the IRS to be out there in these spaces, whether it's the Russian oligarchs, whether it's child exploiters, whether it's terrorism financing sites, whether it's just bad people doing bad things. You know Silk Road was an IRS agent, special agent. Silk Road, you could go on and hire an assassin if you wanted to, right? And that was back in the day. But also during my term, you probably saw there was a seizure of $1 billion that had been sitting in the virtual currency world associated with Silk Road. We don't sleep. They are the night guard. They are out there, and they're helping all of you. Where we're headed, you're immediately going to see a change. Fiscal year 23, so September 30, 23. You're going to see, phone calls answered. That's the simple part. Give us money so we can hire enough people to answer the phones in language. Show people the respect that they deserve. If you're part of this country, you deserve that respect. If you're not part of this country, you deserve that respect so we can entice you to come be part of this country. Ever give thought of 2 things? You don't live in America. You live in the United States of America. Somebody hundreds of years ago could have called this country America, and today we'd call it America. But today, if you go to Canada and say, hey, I live in America, you're going to get a little bit of a challenge, right? Why do we have the World Championships? Why do we have the World Series when they're only from this country? But you live in the United States of America. When I say the word united, I see all of us kind of elbow to elbow, right? You take on one of us, you take on all of us. Are we stronger because we respect and accept and appreciate people who come into this country from other countries, people who have different skin color, people who have accents, people who went to public school and people who went to Ivy League schools, you know? It's not the degrees you have, it's the person you are, right? It's what's inside, and we respect that. And that's why we call ourselves the United States of America. We are, inside the IRS, very aware of the terminology of working together. If you wonder, are we stronger for that reason? I'll drop the challenge. Go to Asia, 3,000 to 5,000 years of history. Go to Europe, 3,000 to 5,000 years of history. Bring something up called COVID and see who they call. What do you guys know about this? Have a military situation. We need help. Can you guys move the 7th Fleet, those aircraft carriers over here? They come to the kids. We have 200 or so, years of history. They come to us because we're vastly stronger. We think about things sometimes before we react to things, because we're the United States of America. We trust and respect everybody's voice, everybody's viewpoint. Living in DC, the past couple of years, I will tell you, specifically to Tam, a little difficult. We saw a flag burn. We saw people throw a flag on the ground. My wife cries when she sees that. I'm disappointed when I see that, because that flag is not just material. My wife would tell you she's not alive and her family's not alive because of what that flag stands for. It's not a perfect country, right? For many reasons. You start with slaves and you go forward. It is the greatest country, and this country tries, and the government of this country is people who try and people who care. IRS employees care. You are going to see a massive amount of funding go into IT and technology. You should challenge me and say, well, you have about 6,000 or 7,000 in-house IT employees. How are you going to, bring on the equivalent of 7,000 IT employees to do this massive expansion? We also have about 7,000 contractors in the IT space. But I live in the United States of America, most powerful country in the world, most powerful tech companies in the world, Austin, Texas, Silicon Valley, many other places. Corporate America, those of you who are with the press, throw down the challenge. How powerful and important would any technology company that was founded and is based here and it relies upon the rule of law and civility in this country, how strong would they be if they were in some other country? They should step up today to assist us. We're hiring contractors from them, but I'm a believer that I came on board to make things better, if I could, not thinking I could. I came on board with you, right? Can we make a difference? We ran into not some headwinds, these are tailwinds. COVID turned out to be a tailwind. It allowed us to change the IRS in the viewpoint of many people. People didn't have to do anything, and they got tons of payments, right? Look at the successes. We got torched. We got torched because of, 2% of the people didn't get their payments. Where were the articles? And where were you all to say 98% of that was accurate? I needed you. I'm not calling you out. I get it. I was on the outside. I needed you to say people should reflect on what they're saying. People, those of you who used to be at IRS who are now in private practice, I really needed you. People at IRS work hard. People at IRS try. Every once in a while I read something, former IRS so-and-so says something, and it's complete fiction. I'm coming, not as commissioner, but you expect those sidebar conversations. Don't try to earn credit on the back of challenging times for IRS employees by getting your name in an article, and then expect me to respect you. That's not going to happen. Call it as you see it, but also explain the challenges that are out there. These challenges, many would have said are insurmountable. We could have turned and just, woe's me, no resources in COVID, sorry, we can't do anything. I've already told you many different lanes where the people of the IRS did it. And I'm telling you from the inside, they did it flawlessly. Technology will change the world for IRS employees, for taxpayers, and for you. You will see it quickly happen. by the second or so quarter, first quarter calendar year 2023, you'll start to see a lot of changes. You've already seen when we didn't have funding, voice bots, chat bots, online live assisters, right? People who owe money to the IRS are not ever going to have to talk to an IRS person. Go in, schedule your own payment. You can do that now up to, I think it's $50,000, which if somebody owes more than 50, pay it down to 50, go in and you got your payment. It is what you want. You can go into a taxpayer assistance center and get the information. You're also going to have, let me talk about ID Me. Where were you guys for me on ID Me? And I love you, okay? This is one-on-one. We got torched from Congress on ID Me because of facial recognition. Big brother, IRS, you're getting too much information. Do you know that still we offer a variant, which is an online, live person, ID Me does. Still over 90% of the people come in with the facial recognition thing. I went and did it to see what it was. I get it why some people might not want to have facial recognition, and I totally respect that. Understand one thing. If I can't tell that Wells is Wells, I can't open up more options for him to go into his portal and do more things. Wells should be able to go online to his portal and amend his tax return and change his address and change any other information. But if I don't have a certain level of what we call authentication, where I'm certain it's Wells, I can't offer Wells that option. So when you come at us on, we can't have facial recognition, and by the way, know that I think 27 other agencies used ID Me before we did. It's only when we got there that it got torched, The spotlight follows us where we go. But there needs to be a balance here. But you also know that we should be offering people who are comfortable in certain lanes the ability to take care of all of their activities with us themselves online. You will see those options happen. You will see us get into that space. You will see the tax professional online portal greatly expand. We got slow on that. We were not able to go as fast as we wanted. I'm not going to use resources as an excuse, but we did take those resources and put them into another lane, kind of like I told you about the Russian oligarch situation. Compliance. The other thing I wanted when I came on board from Game of Thrones was fire-breathing dragons. I want people to know that a tax return is not an offer to negotiate with the government. A tax return is filed based on somebody's best efforts. It's signed under penalties of perjury, frequently with a tax professional. By the way, you should see in our data book, last year we did over 450 undercover operations, almost exclusively with tax professionals. There's a reason for that. I'm talking to the choir, right? You guys get up in the morning, you attend conferences, you want to do the right thing. I can tell you, and every tax professional is not like that. We need to police our own. IRS needs to police them, and we will. And we should be expected to do so. The people who try to get it right, we need to provide the services to help them get it right, whether it's in language, whether it's clear guidance. Look at some of our guidance. We used to think, issue frequently asked questions, and we told people, so we put it on irs.gov. Well, if you're an auto mechanic at Nissan, one, you're not willing to risk going on irs.gov, even though we tell you we don't track that, right? And you're not going to know what that frequently asked question meant. But look what we're doing now. We're coming out in single syllable, sort of with, I call it the Apple effect, figures, doing this and doing that, walking people through sort of a road to so they can see and understand. And in my mind, I think we're different. And it's through your guys' assistance and my assistance, and you can all see that Haley's standing up. When the protection detail guys get to about the steps, you'll see me just run that way. And that's really the big hook. But compliance, a strong, visible enforcement mechanism supports the compliant taxpayers. You want us to have a fair, impartial, but meaningful enforcement presence. You want our people to be trained. You want our people to be experienced. You don't want to see people get steamrolled because they don't have the years of experience. Our hiring is going to reflect that. We're hiring younger, less experienced people. We're hiring mid-career people, and we're hiring youngsters like myself who are not going to have the equivalent of client responsibilities. They're going to be coaches. to the people who come in. They're going to provide the experience. So you're going to hold a deposition, let's say, in some context. You might see somebody like Tom Cullinan sitting alongside a revenue agent or a counsel lawyer. And go ahead, ask your questions, you know. But you're going to see the experience show up to help, to coach, and do that. That's fair. We shouldn't train our people at the expense of taxpayers, but taxpayers shouldn't have an advantage because they can bring in, you know, a high degree of talent and who are resource challenged. You want us to get there. You also want an experienced person who knows when an audit or an appeal or a litigation matter should be shut down. An inexperienced person is going to carry on a lot longer than they should. An experienced person will shut it down. You want that. That's right. We should only be in cases that we should be in. We should not be in cases we should not be in. But I don't think you can question the fact that we opened an examination. And I will tell you that various newspaper articles that have been written, mainstream media articles that have been written, flat out false. Nobody, by innuendo, should make a characterization as to me or any IRS employee. We'll talk after, you know, later, but don't think we don't read those things, and don't think they do damage. When the person on the street, the mechanic at Nissan, reads, oh, you know, IRS out of control or something, they're wondering, should they really step in? Are they the only ones filing accurate return? You want appropriate compliance, and so do we. So I've overspoken. That's a shock. That's really never happened. When Big Scott gets close, that's just time to run, you know. I really came not for all that. I came to thank you. I came to say that it was very meaningful to me as commissioner during this term to be able to say that I'm a tax guy, that I'm a tax practitioner, tax professional. On many occasions, this has been an emotional journey. I ran into things that we couldn't fix, collectively we couldn't fix. I ran into people who deserved an awful lot of support, you know, working at the IRS, and I couldn't get it to them quite often. You know, I had people the equivalent of drowning in whatever lane they were in, and I couldn't get the assistance. The greatest country in the world should appropriately fund, bring on whatever oversight you want, but appropriately fund the agency and the people who bring in 96% of the gross revenue of this country. And most importantly, we should all respect those people. My ask of you going forward is where you can lend a hand, where you can show respect. And I'm not asking you to roll over and lay down and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But remember, we're working really hard on this side. The last thing people ask me, what are you going to do next? Many of you know this story. And so when it became, you know, you're going to get the call, you're going to be commissioner, the first conversation I had was with Tam. I might get asked if I'm interested in being commissioner. You know, I need to be able to respond. And you need to talk to your parents. Tam's one of 7 children. 3 daughters live in Los Angeles, greater Los Angeles area. The boys up in Silicon Valley, they're in tech. I said to Tam, you need to go talk to your parents. Because at this particular point in time, when I say that I'm the slow one, Tam's older sister, Jan, retired as an engineer at age 48. She has 3 engineering degrees. Her bachelor's degree is UCLA. There were only 12 students. She was the only female. At age 48, she finished her career as an engineer. She went back to community college. She took biology, chemistry, et cetera. She took the MCATs. She applied to medical school because she wanted to be a doctor. Jan finished medical school in June of 2020. Residency program, University of Washington, Boise, Idaho. Tam and I were in DC. Jan was in Boise. The parents are in Little Saigon, living in a house that the children bought. And that left Tui, the youngest sister, to take care of the parents. The fairness in all that is I couldn't even today tell you the right decision was for us to go to DC when you know the family history. But she went over to her parents, and her parents said what you would expect them to say. Of course you go to Washington, D.C. So immediately when I leave IRS, we're going to give back to the family, whether that's 6 months or 6 years, I couldn't tell you today. Her family are definitely my heroes. The IRS folks adopted her family day one, and I'm going to kind of go through this quickly, and I apologize, Haley, but some of you were at my swearing in, some of you weren't, but it's a room not too dissimilar to this, main hall, IRS, Washington, D.C., 2 rows of chairs, people standing, there's a balcony area, people looking in. Then Secretary Mnuchin standing at a podium over here, Dave Cotter and I and a couple others in behind, Tam, her dad, and Charlie. Charlie flew in from Sinai for my swearing-in ceremony. Secretary Mnuchin introduced Tam, right? Mrs. Rettig, born and raised in Vietnam, escaped from Vietnam. Secretary Mnuchin then introduced her dad. The week before, Tam went to Men's Warehouse, bought 2 suits, 2 ties, 2 shirts, because he doesn't live in a world where he needs any of that. Secretary Mnuchin, and I'm sitting in the back, gave her dad's story. And when he got about, a third of the way into it, everybody in the audience stood up and clapped. This is not a man who asks anybody to respect him or acknowledge him or even know he's in the room. And he doesn't speak English. And I'm watching Tam lean over, and she says to her dad, "You need to stand up," right, in Vietnamese. And he stands up and he's facing me. He then pivots to the crowd. So now I'm looking at him from behind, and he puts his hand up. Treasury photographer takes that picture. I have the picture of the IRS employees showing appreciation to my father-in-law for the life that he had and everybody who had the similar life. I sent it out to the extended family. Her youngest brother immediately sends back, "Who called out Bo me, Mom and Dad?" And I said, "The secretary," with a capital S. And I got back all caps, "No way." Like, the secretary knows who we are? Like, what's happening? From that moment on, I saw, if I didn't know it before, I saw the human side of the people inside the IRS. A man who they didn't know, who could do nothing to or for them, couldn't even speak to them. And they stood up and clapped for him because he's part of the underserved part of the world. So recognize that and understand the importance of those kinds of things. So I apologize. I think we're hanging around a while. I do whatever the protection detail says. By the way, there's a number of people who travel with me. We travel international, we travel locally. They're what's referred to as, they hate me to talk about them. I think I'm probably not supposed to, but are they going to fire me? It's called the Commissioner's Protection Detail. We get into situations. Tam had to walk around Washington, D.C. with a mugshot of somebody. People have, threatened to come to D.C. to essentially kill the commissioner. Some of that activity spiked when people were talking about 87,000 armed agents. So you guys are family, obviously Tam and everybody's family. But I travel with people who've said things to me, "You have nothing to worry about. They'd have to take every one of us out before they get a hand on you." And these are people who have children. It's not lost on me what people do for a living and what they give. And my privilege has been, I never have to look or see anything. Often I'm following Scott, and follow Scott, you can't see ahead. It's like, I just follow Scott. I'm not asking you to give them any applause or praise, but I will tell you that what's our average trip, we either leave DC on a red eye or we're on like a 6:30 flight in the morning. We go all day to IRS offices. We hop another flight at night. We stay in a hotel. We repeat in another city. We do the same thing in another city. It's one thing for me to do it, right? And, I get the spotlight, if you will, or whatever. These guys are the silent ones that make it so that we can do that, so we can do it here. I can't travel without them. And I will tell you, let me just say, we do a lot of red eyes, both internationally as well. They're not allowed to sleep on a plane. So what do? Yeah, I fall asleep, I wake up, "Hey, Scott, you okay?" "Yeah, he's okay." I go back to sleep, So it's a circus. It takes a lot of people. I've told you what I think about the people at the IRS, and sort of, I have a traveling family that they'll be family with us forever. And, we all give in our own ways. And I have a couple of presentations week after next on the West Coast, and then that's it for me. I think my last presentation is UCLA on October 27, and then, I'm basically done on the public side of being IRS. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for letting me ramble on. This might have been not the presentation you were looking for. It might have been a little disjointed. I am getting emotional the closer I get to the end of the term from a lot of different perspectives. But I'm asking you to pitch in to help hold the agency accountable, support the next commissioner. I think that's vital. It's an important position, and it's certainly important to tax professionals. It's certainly important to taxpayers, and I think it's vital to this country. And I think we've earned a lot of credit. You'll see, if you look at any of the hearings that I've been in now, you'll see them open up in their 5 minutes with, I want to thank the employees of the Internal Revenue Service, and they close. I want to thank the employees of the Internal Revenue Service. 2 days ago, or yesterday maybe it was, I talked to a very high-ranking senator, and they're calling now and, kind of exchanging appreciation and whatnot. And this particular senator said, do you have an ask? Is there an ask that you have of us? And I said, my only ask would be that you continue to thank the employees of the Internal Revenue Service, that, you guys have been vocal, I appreciate it, and it's both sides. And he said, well, that's an easy one. He says, I'm taking a note down. I'll make sure. He's a ranking member of a very high, powerful committee, very, very important to the IRS. And he said, you can count us to do that. And I said, I know I can because I'm not disappearing, and I have your phone number. By the way, every member of Congress has my cell phone number. And I think that's important. When they would say, hey, my constituents can't get a call in, my response, if you ever saw these hearings, was, you have my cell phone number. How can your people not get served when you have my cell phone number? Why would you not call me, right? There's one hearing that I got halfway through my cell phone number before I realized it's probably not a good thing to give my cell phone number to everybody. I'm done. We can leave, and thank you all.
Chuck, as you step down, I think everybody in this room, every member of the section, and certainly for myself, we know that your legacy is that you are leaving the position of Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, and the IRS is a better place as you're leaving it than when you came. It's a better place to work. And that one quick story, and some of you know this story. Just about a year ago, in November, the Tulane Tax Institute invited Chuck to speak, and it happened to be his birthday.
65th birthday.
At the speaker's dinner at Antoine's, maybe to some extent as a surprise, they brought out baked Alaska as his birthday cake. And Chuck first made sure that every member of his security detail got a piece of that cake. Chuck, we appreciate your being here and look forward to seeing everyone in Reunion A Ballroom next door for the reception.